Well, it's 11 a.m. Pacific time in Los Angeles, California. And for those all over the world who are joining this AltaSea webinar, welcome. We may wait a few minutes for the signals to reach everybody and back and forth. But we're certainly joined by a fantastic panel, and the subject couldn't be more appropriate. So, Tim, could you play some music while we wait for people to fully join this webinar? And is there some ocean sounds you could make?
We actually do have we actually have one of our donors was kind enough to give us our own music at AltaSea. He's in the music industry and he loves the ocean. He's a diver, and someday I have to play it for you. I wish I had thought of it. We could have played it. We could have played some inspirational music to start. But for Dr. Ramos, I could also just hum some SC songs.
No, I don't think that works, Tim, but it's a decent idea. But I was thinking of orcas, the sounds of orcas in the background while we did this. But we're going on, we're now at 11:01, and I think I would love to welcome everybody again to this AltaSea webinar, Mobilizing an Ocean Economy Workforce in California. And again, we're in Los Angeles. We have, Tim has the ocean behind him. It's a perfect subject matter. I think we have noted in the notification of this webinar that as a result of COVID-19's pandemic, workers in California and throughout America are obviously losing their jobs at a record-setting number. I think it's 1 million in LA County, which is quite significant. And however, I'm happy to say that California has a competitive advantage with its coastline. The ocean economy is uniquely positioned to provide critical economic support to the state in the development of a climate-conscious workforce recovery efforts. And that's why I really agreed to join this. I'm David Abel, the publisher of the Planning Report and chair of VerdeXchange, and a huge supporter of AltaSea. Conservative estimates place a projected global value of the blue economy at $3 trillion by 2013. 3 trillion is still a large number. The key to maintaining the state's economic success lies in cultivating a 21st century workforce, and that's why Dean Ramos is with us, that facilitates access to education and employment opportunities, and that's why Matt and Horton from Milken is with us. As current students, recent graduates, and a massive wave of recently unemployed workers all enter the available labor force, state and local leaders in education, business, and policy really must collaborate to effectively insulate and direct California's talent pipeline, which will be very much the focus of this webinar. This effort requires recognizing the context and geographies of our state, driving place-based economic development and job creation through innovation in our existing and developing industries. And I'll address some questions to Dr. Ramos about how do you prepare people for jobs that don't yet even exist. A particular underutilized opportunity for growth lies in the blue economy. So that brings us to this webinar, and we have Tim McOsker, the CEO of AltaSea, Matt Horton, the Director of Public Policy for the Milken Institute Center for Regional Economy, and Patricia Ramos, Dean Workforce and Economic Development, Santa Monica College. I'd like to give each of them a second to define and describe their role here. Tim, you're the easiest, you're the CEO. Give it to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate you bringing us together. Tim McOsker, CEO of AltaSea at the Port of Los Angeles. What is AltaSea? AltaSea is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit corporation that's in partnership with the Port of LA, which is a governmental agency. And our partnership is place-based. We have leased for 50 years, we have a 50-year lease on 35 acres of land, wharf, and water at something called City Dock 1 in the Port of Los Angeles. City Dock 1 because it was actually the original dock that was developed at the beginning of the 1900s to get Los Angeles ready for the 20th century. And it is long since obsolete, and we are repurposing it to make us ready for the 21st and 22nd and 23rd century. In the ocean economy, which I'll get to in a minute. But the way we've envisioned doing that is that AltaSea on the 35 acres has about 250,000 square feet of existing warehouse that can be adaptively reused. Our project one in phase one will be to adaptively reuse 180,000 square feet of warehouse that is set aside for business incubation, business startups, established businesses, all in the ocean economy. Next to that structure is another structure that will be repurposed. It's 46,000 square feet now. We have designs to make it about a 60,000 square foot building that will be a multi-use university research center. And I'll come back to that when we talk about the research center. But we will put researchers, professors, instructors, students into that building, and they will have the ability to be at the research bench and be immediately adjacent to a business center. So the technical transfer that is so critically important to universities and so critically important to our future innovation and our emerging economies can happen right on our campus. And maybe most importantly, our third project in phase one is to build the engagement center, which will be this state-of-the-art, beautiful engagement center where our environmental documentation tells us we're going to have 50,000 students a year, young students, as well as 100,000 visitors who will come and learn more about what's happening behind them, behind this building on the property in the business sector. What are the new emerging businesses and what's happening in the research center? All of it designed to inspire the next generation of scientists and entrepreneurs and the next generations of innovators in the blue economy. So that is us in a nutshell. And we are place-based, but we're participating in this worldwide blue economy. And we are really excited to be here today to talk to additional experts who are going to be critical to the success of AltaSea.
Well, I want to bring on Dean Ramos and Matt Horton in a second with introductions. But Tim, because this is a discussion about workforce and job opportunities, what attracted a talented lawyer, former chief of staff to a mayor, managing partner of a law firm to take the position of CEO? Give us the reason.
Well, the reason was I was practicing law. Thank you very much for saying all that. I can't tell you what attracted that talented person. I'll tell you what attracted me. I was practicing law and actually came to AltaSea at the Port of Los Angeles as their general counsel. And I was assisting our founding executive director, Jenny Crusoe, in reworking the lease and reworking, how we were going to present this project. I am born and raised in San Pedro in the harbor area, which is the immediate residential community next to this project. And while providing the lawyering, fell in love with the project, fell in love with the idea of doing a few things, creating this business center, creating this academic center, and bringing to an area that is underserved and has a great need for jobs and economic development and opportunity for our youth, bringing something to this community that it badly needs. And while we're doing economic development and while we're creating jobs, we also have a chance to save the world, because so much of what can happen in the blue economy can actually reverse some of these existential challenges that we have in global warming, ocean acidification, sea level rise. So it's something I just fell in love with. And at the end of the process, Jenny Crusoe, our executive director, went to the board and said, why don't we bring McOsker on as a CEO? And
Well, Tim, I'm not sure you, other than saving the world, you imagined this in Notre Dame when you were an undergraduate, becoming the CEO of AltaSea. But let me go to the Dean Tricia Ramos, the Dean of Workforce and Economic Development at Santa Monica College. Talk about what your responsibilities include, and then I'm going to ask you why you took this position.
Sure, David. Thank you. Tricia Ramos, I'm the Dean of Workforce and Economic Development at Santa Monica College. And my job is, kind of a little bit of everything. I am primarily responsible for bringing resources to the college, whether those are capital resources or human resources, to really assist all of our career education programs, to just ensure that they are, cutting edge, that they have the equipment that they need, that they have the curriculum they need, that the faculty have the professional development that they need to make sure that we are preparing, a talent pipeline for employers and ensuring that students are getting the most relevant skills. Sounds like an easy thing to do, but we've got 35,000 students at UCLA. We're at Santa Monica College, and that is roughly the size of UCLA and USC. We've got over 100 different programs, and about half of those are our career education programs. So it's a challenging job. It's a great job. It's an opportunity to work, not just on campus, but with our economic development partners and workforce development partners to ensure that this little seaside community college has all of the resources that it needs.
But Dean, when you were in college probably yesterday, did you imagine you would be this dean and doing this?
No, not at all. In fact, I didn't even know what workforce was. I came to Santa Monica College on the student services side. I was a counselor. I loved that job. I had primarily been in the business world. I owned a business, a couple of coffee houses, and catered coffee to celebrities, and worked with some of the the finer caterers in Los Angeles. And so wanting to save the world and kind of getting paid for what I was doing for free on my volunteer efforts and getting more Latinas and people of color into higher ed, I came to Santa Monica College, and then I was offered the opportunity to work in the area of workforce, and I didn't know what it was. But a very close friend, and actually somebody close to Tim McOsker, his deputy chief of staff at Mayor Hahn, his office, when he was the mayor, basically talked me into it and saying that workforce was the future, and I definitely need to put my talent there. So
there we go. So let me turn to Matt Horton. Matt, describe what your responsibilities are in this organization you call the Milken Institute Center for Regional Economics.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David, and thanks to the AltaSea team for including me in this. I'm director of public policy and programs at the Milken Institute Center for Regional Economics and California Center, which is kind of a living lab, if you will, for us to see how some of the work that we're doing applies to the real world, since California's economy is so big in scale and so impactful on a global sense. So in that role, I focus on areas related to housing, development and supply, infrastructure, finance, and workforce development, especially the future of work and how that's taking shape. So looking at emerging skills that offer more equity, really, in terms of access and the jobs that are either emerging in this space is a focus of ours in terms of reshaping partnerships and policies that can enhance access to some of these opportunities that are emerging in ways that in ways that further or enhance the equity focus of regional economic development.
But Matt, since we're going to be talking about jobs that may not even exist yet, how did you get there? How did you find this job?
That's a good question. I think I found it. It's only maybe 7 years I've been in this role, but I think I initially found it through like Indeed, and I said that looks like a job I want to do. And so I kind of leveraged a network, and I said, who knows people at the Milken Institute, and how can I make sure somebody reads my resume? And I kind of pounded the pavement that way, and I finally got a few interviews, and it must have been charm, because they decided that they wanted to pay me for a while, and luckily.
Well, clearly it was charm, Matt. I want to turn back. I mean, some who are attending this webinar might wonder why we're dwelling so much on the journey each of us take to find the job we want to save the world. Tim, let me bring it back to you and talk about, as we open this conversation, why AltaSea is hosting this panel, Mobilizing an Ocean Economy Workforce, and yesterday's panel that you hosted. What's the agenda here? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking that. I mean, I think it probably begins with, the right question would be, what is the ocean economy? What is the blue economy? And those are interchangeable. So if you hear me say blue economy, I mean ocean economy, and vice versa. And the truth is there's no set definition worldwide, but we rely on the World Bank definition. And the World Bank looks at the ocean economy as the sustainable use of the ocean, very important, the sustainable use of the ocean resources for three things: economic development, a way to improve our livelihoods, improve the quality of human life, and to create jobs. But all of it while we preserve ocean health for the future. So it's a responsible use of ocean resources. And as you said at the outset, David, in 2020, it's estimated very conservatively that the ocean economy is worth about $1.5 trillion. And in the next 10 years, that will double to $3 trillion. And to unpack what the ocean, what those jobs, what that activity is, certainly in California and in Los Angeles, the sectors are understood to break down into really just about 6 areas: tourism and recreation, and marine transportation, and marine construction, the infrastructure that goes into all of these activities, shipbuilding, which is really minimal in California, living resources, fishing, aquaculture, and then offshore mineral development. Of those 6, it's really, really important to note that in California and in the United States, but in California and Los Angeles, tourism and recreation and marine transportation, the shipping industry, are far and away the majority, 90% or more than 90%, with the others being obviously much smaller percentages. And in California, we know that these industries, and again, far and away, tourism and marine transportation are the big ones. In California, it creates about 1 million jobs a year, or it maintains 1 million jobs a year. And currently there's about $143 billion in output, as you said, I think, David. But in LA County, we have 200,000 jobs, more than 200,000 jobs associated, and $34 billion in output. And we know that growth is going to happen, that 1.2 trillion and 3 trillion is going to happen somewhere. Let's capture it here. And to capture it here, I think it's really important to note that, you know, we have a fragile economy. We found out through COVID, the crisis of COVID, which is first and foremost a healthcare crisis, health crisis. We all agree it's a health crisis, but it's also created an economic crisis. That economic crisis has hit the entertainment and hospitality and recreation, and it's really, really, really impacted that huge chunk of the blue economy. And so we think as we come out of COVID, and we certainly will come out of COVID, we have additional challenges. We have climate change challenges. We have challenges in consolidation of industry. We have challenges in, we don't want to overfish the waters. So we need to look to that growth of the blue economy. We need to look at emerging sectors. What is emerging? This is what I'm coming to. What's really, really, really important is we look to those opportunities where, under the World Bank definition, we can grow this blue economy, grow a diverse economy that doesn't just rely upon recreation and entertainment, and grow it in a way where we're creating jobs, improving livelihoods, but sustaining the planet for the future. And so we at AltaSea think those are in aquaculture, ocean farming in a sustainable way. We think it's in robotics and ocean tech, where we're going to have machines and robots and technical ways of monitoring the safe growth of the blue economy. We certainly think there are ocean renewables we need to look at, whether that's wind or kinetic wave energy. And we think ocean renewable energies would be extraordinarily important. And there's going to be a lot of jobs that are created by trying to decarbon the shipping industry, as well as the dockside movement of goods. And we want to make sure that we are in a position where, as we come out of COVID, as we grow this economy, that we not only capture that part of the economy, but we also train the young women and men who are coming up and are going to have jobs for that future.
Thank you, Tim. Dean Ramos, how do you capture the attention of very practical students going to Santa Monica Community College in need of work, especially during this pandemic? How do you capture their attention and focus it on the opportunity Tim has just defined? That seems to be a challenge.
Yeah, and particularly now in this COVID environment and the environment that students find themselves in is doing their scholarly work and their their higher education pursuits remotely, which, they never, I'm sure, planned on, just like none of us did. But I think that students need good paying jobs, and they're very cognizant of it. And at the end of the day, there is so much promise in the ocean economy. It's very exciting. Students nowadays, and I guess let me just back up for a second and say that community colleges serve a diverse student body. And you have everything from students that are taking concurrent enrollment, high school enrollment, to your traditional 18 to 24-year-olds. You've got adult learners that are coming back to reskill. And at Santa Monica, we even have a college for our older populations that we call our emeritus
like me.
college, our seniors. No,
Yeah,
seniors like 55 now. And so, and they get to go to, to college for free. So we've got this whole gamut of, truly cradle to
Grave.
yeah, I don't want to even say that. I was going to say to career, I think that, and now that people are having to work longer because they're living longer, I think there's just a lot of opportunity. So it really depends on which population you're talking about, David. Like, how do you attract that person? I think for the younger person, you want to get them engaged early. And there's so much policy and funding now that is allowing for that pathway development to start much earlier. Our California legislature, in all of its brilliance, understanding that we've got to get a more educated workforce, is investing, a lot of money in career education. So it's exposing faculty to those opportunities that are obviously going to be, the best, opportunities for students, when they're engaging. And so at the end of the day, we just have to keep our eye on the ball and where the jobs are. And then when you're talking about an ocean economy, that's not one industry, it's a cluster of industries. So, it's a little bit more challenging, but again, at the end of the job, it's not just, at the end of the day, it's not just jobs, it's good paying jobs. And so that's the promise that they're coming to college for.
Dean Ramos, I want to ask you, because as a 25-year board member of the LA Economic Development Corporation, I know a lot of the private sector come to you to figure out the program to get the students that are seeking those well-paying jobs into those jobs. Mm-hmm. And you've been running a program called Promo Pathways, and I wonder if you could elaborate on whether that's a model for what we have here as an opportunity with the ocean economy.
Yes, I think that there's a lot to learn from the Promo Pathway program, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm running it. I think the faculty are pretty much doing all of the hard work, but that program was a project of the television industry executives that saw a need to diversify the talent pool that they were getting to producing on-air promotions. So they had what they called promo people and editors, and they were finding that job needed to be combined. And they also were basically seeing that the students that were coming in to the television industry were coming out of schools, that were, pretty much producing a homogenized, talent pool. And they wanted more Black and brown talent that was reflective of the viewing audience. So they really made a concerted effort to come together and do everything they had to do to keep to basically recruit, very strong Black and brown talent that could go into this television industry and not just get the jobs, but survive in that pretty, intense industry. And, that just took a tremendous amount of energy to put it together. But without that industry engagement, saying that we've got all of these jobs, we're willing to come into the classroom and, bring all of our talent into the classroom. And we will give your students opportunities for work-based learning opportunities, where those are internships, paid internships, and jobs at the end. Nobody in my position is expecting employers to guarantee students jobs. We just want them to guarantee that that opportunity for students. If the employer is coming in and saying, if you produce the talent, we will give your students the first option, then, that's the win-win. But that engagement has to continue. And so, of course, we've got to have all of the, the faculty trained in understanding what is happening in the industry. And as technology changes, that is, a constant where the faculty need those opportunities to go into industry to learn actually what's happening. Students need the opportunity to be able to learn, the diversity of skills that they're going to need. And, at the end of the day, I think that we're doing a pretty good job of producing talent. We've completed our 8th cohort. We're starting our 9th cohort and we've graduated about 200 students, and they're at ABC, CBS, Time, Warner, Fox, and they're just, they're coming in at very entry level and very quickly advancing, because this program is multidisciplinary. It's not just, and that's what is happening in multiple areas. And I think that this is what's going to happen in the blue economy or the ocean economy as well. It's not going to be one job or one sector that emerges. So students are going to need to have a diversity of talent that requires faculty to come together from different disciplines. And so that's where I think there's some lessons to be learned.
Well, Dean Ramos, I think you've done a perfect segue to Matt, because you set the challenge for what industry needs to do to partner with the community colleges and all colleges. So Matt Horton, if I turn to you and say, talent hubs are an important concept for the Milken Institute, do you see them working in the ocean economy and in collaboration with AltaSea and educational partners like Santa Monica Community College?
Yeah, absolutely. This idea about nurturing talent hubs is really just a function of intent and how that a regional group of leaders and partners come together to say, how are we going to provide the programs, identify the core competencies, establish connections between employers like Tricia was talking about, that act as career pathways that can serve as a beacon for a region to say, hey, if you want to be involved in these industries, you should come here in order to access the R&D or access the specific jobs or employers that you're hoping to be a part of. So it's about program development, and it's about investing in those inputs that lead to more beneficial outputs from an economic development and performance standpoint. Our major index that we do every year, our best performing cities index, that measures some of the economic performance more oriented towards innovation-based economies around the country, does just that, to say is really a reflection of those investments that regions or leaders have been able to solidify that lead to broad-based dynamism and other successful outputs on the back end in terms of economic development and performance. So if we apply that to the ocean economy and what Tim and Tricia are talking about here, we distill all the money that's coming in from an R&D standpoint from the UCs. I think it's in 2019, I think the report said something to the tune of $3.4 billion or so dollars of federal research money is aggregated and distributed by the UCs alone. To think about how we might be able to leverage some of that from an R&D and tech transfer, and nurture some of the spillover effects around the ocean and blue economy, whether it be bioscience and life sciences, or R&D that touches on renewable energy or aquaculture, and the triple bottom line around aquaculture of like carbon capture and climate mitigation. There's a huge potential for jobs that fall under these sectors that we just need to identify from a core competency standpoint and further nurture.
Well, Matt, again, we've lost 1 million jobs in LA County, and people are rightly depressed about the economic situation we're in because of the pandemic. And a lot of the focus of public attention and public policy is on triage programs to protect those who have homes and jobs and families to support. You're talking about the future. What needs to be unleashed for the future you're thinking about from a private sector investment job opportunity for it to be realized? What do we need to do to get equal attention on the future of the market?
I think that's a really good point, David. And I don't think it's a complex solution, but it does require incremental and kind of incremental buy-in and long-term foresight. That being the kind of the regional cohesion that's needed here to identify the opportunity long-term on a long-term basis. You look at initiatives like the Fresno Drive that were really born out of that type of regional cohesion and community development, that were able to solidify a plan and get seed investment essentially from the governor's office to say, this is how we want to build a more resilient and inclusive economy. Steps like that are going to be needed from a regional development and community building kind of partnership aspect to kind of identify the long-term benefits, which obviously the LA EDC plan does a great step of doing. But I think far too long, plans like this, we forget that without the intentional next steps on implementation, that we're only outlining potential and not the ability to actually solidify those investments. I think solidify is my word of the day. It must be a Friday.
Well, thanks, Matt. I want to go back to you, Tim. We're already getting questions, and I encourage others to submit those questions, which we'll get to in about 5 or 10 minutes. But Tim, I want to come back to you for a second, because in collaboration with AltaSea, you brought in the Indiana Jones of the ocean, Admiral Ballard, and you had originally the chief scientist, Sandra Whitehouse, who are terrific, and they speak to the areas of research and investigation and collaboration and tech transfer. Speak to those collaborations and what they mean for workforce opportunities and collaborations with the fishing industry and the robotics industry, et cetera.
Sure. Thank you very much, David. So Dr. Sandra Whitehouse was our chief scientific officer, our initial scientific officer, who helped us put together, or did put together, the plan for what we should do in the creation of business and business innovation, in conjunction with our university sector. And what Dr. Whitehouse told us was, don't try to be all things to all people. Focus in a couple of areas that are emerging and that are important to the sustainable use of the ocean in the future. And so she said, really focus on aquaculture. Aquaculture, the sustainable farming of bivalves and seaweeds, and possibly in the future finfish in federal waters, is a place that is absolutely, it's a business sector that's absolutely ideal for this geographic area. We have about 28,000 acres of really, really good water for aquaculture just off the coast of the San Pedro, Long Beach, LA harbor complex. And there are great opportunities in business, there are great job opportunities, and there's also great opportunities for reversing some of the effects of climate change through aquaculture. She said also focus second and equally on blue robotics, underwater ocean exploration, for scientific endeavor, for business endeavors. That there's going to be a great need to, identify what's out there in the ocean. The ocean comprises 71% of our planet, and we've mapped about 10% of it or less. So we know more about the face of Mars than we know about the bottom of the ocean. And it's going to be extraordinarily important for us to investigate the ocean, to turn it into, as the World Bank says, an opportunity for better livelihoods, jobs, economic development in a sustainable way. Third, we actually, working with Sandra and others, we've actually been encouraged to get into the ocean renewable energies, particularly kinetic wave energy. I want to come back to Dr. Bob Ballard. He was introduced to us. He is a scientist of great note, but most well known for discovering the Titanic. He's done a lot of real serious science, but everybody on Earth, remembers the movie and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so Dr. Bob Ballard is this great Indiana Jones of the ocean, as you say, David. And he has actually made his winter home for his research vessel, the Nautilus, at AltaSea. So he's a lot of fun to have around. He draws a lot of attention. He creates a lot of interest, and he's actually due back to the site in just a couple of weeks. So we are really, really pleased to have Bob Ballard.
I wonder if you could elaborate on his announced mission while docked at AltaSea, which is to map the ocean, and what that means in terms of research and job opportunities that come out of that kind of research.
Well, Dr. Bob Ballard has a lot. He's an underwater ocean archaeologist, and he's mapping the ocean generally. He's involved in particularly in a project that shows the migration to the Californias along the coastline, and he's mapping caves up and down the California coastline and to the north of us. It would be impossible for me to tell you what the importance is for the future and for job opportunities, because when I was a kid, we went to the moon, we went to the heavens, and we didn't know what we were going to find, and we created technologies like this that we had no idea were going to be the world in our pocket. And I think the same is true for discoveries in the ocean. If we map the ocean, if we are in the ocean looking for scientific discovery, are we going to find medicines? Quite likely. Are we going to find energy sources? Quite likely. Are we going to understand more about ourselves and about the future of our planet? Absolutely. So I couldn't tell you what the job opportunities are, what discoveries will be, but they will be enormous and impossible to predict.
Tim, in preparing for this webinar, I don't know if you can see this, but I pulled out Lewis and Clark, The Journey of the Core of Discovery.
Yes.
And I expect you to write this book with Dr. Ballard and Sandra Whitehouse in a couple of years about the ocean exploration and what it turns into. But I want to turn to Dean Ramos for a second and talk about, you mentioned, Dean, that the legislature and the state are looking at programs to assist students and encourage your students into finding the work of their lifetime. What are those programs, and what new programs need to happen to unleash this potential and connect these students to these opportunities?
Yeah, well, that's the $64 million question, right? So what are those jobs of the future?
I'm sorry, you're pricing this at 64 million. You may be too low if the legislature is listening. So go ahead.
So I think that I think as Tim has alluded to, we don't know what the future is going to bring in terms of jobs. And, I think that enticing students to come into, an industry or get excited about industry cluster where the jobs are not quite defined yet, is challenging. But I think first it is going to take bringing the faculty together to really understand more about what those opportunities are. I have the mindset, because I have the experience, that bringing the right people together, you can solve the most, vexing of societal challenges. And so at SMC, we have, a history and a culture of creating programming in sustainability. We have a co-located nonprofit organization called Sustainable Works, co-located on campus, and they do everything from helping with our own campus sustainability, our own composting, and infusing that mentality into our curriculum. We've got, a public policy center that is really looking at how students can, be involved in, solving some of these issues like climate change and other, challenges such as homelessness and, all kinds of other societal challenges. But I've already started to bring together faculty around sustainability in life sciences, in business, computer science, in earth sciences, and those faculty had not read the LAEDC report that was commissioned by AltaSea. Obviously, it was just produced at the beginning of this outbreak, but the enthusiasm that I have already noted by just bringing them together, we're just using their talent and their interests that they already have in our communities, and looking at how we can work together so that as we work together, I think that we will be able to uncover those opportunities together as you attract businesses and that economic development that comes in. If they know that there's a local talent pool, then, I think that will be part of that attraction for the businesses that, that creates those job opportunities of the future. But, so everyone has their role. Me as an administrator, my job is to work with people like Matt at Milken and LAEDC, and our co-located center at LAEDC, which is called the Center for Competitive Workforce, to make sure that we're at the cutting edge. And, we really appreciate Matt really bringing us into this conversation, and Tim, of course, knowing that that, you know, we'll do whatever we can to service our students, because when you think about who our students are, they're our community. And if you're talking about place-based employment, Tim, you're certainly singing my song, because the effects of gentrification cannot be understated. And you've got so many people, that cannot continue to live, in these, ocean communities. Like you're very fortunate to have been born and raised your entire life in, the San Pedro area, but that can't be said for everyone. I live on the west side. Santa Monica, has been devastated economically by this, by this COVID outbreak. I mean, it's been, it was a $2 billion tourism industry that is now in shambles. And so working together to rebuild that, and to think about having the ocean economy as a part of that rebuilding, for the tech sector, for the biotech sector, and all of that. So, it's exciting. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you, Dean. And I want the questions to continue to come. We'll get to them momentarily, but I want to go to you, Matt, because I think Tim could tell the story, but the history over the last 100 years in San Pedro started with the fishing industry and canneries and employment and a thriving economy there, also resting on tourism and travel to and from the ports and trade to and from the ports. But now you've got aquaculture and farming, and I'll note for all the panelists that I'm aware that Mars Corporation, the 5th largest private corporation in the world, most people think of them as a candy company, have been deeply involved in pet foods and the search for protein, and the oceans are their bed for looking for those proteins. And they placed their chief scientist at UC Davis for the last 4 years to work with that university on research that leads to the discovery of those proteins in the ocean. Those are the kinds of things, Matt, I would think that the Milken Institute would be interested in. Can you elaborate on what other potential opportunities we can hang out there for our audience and be tempting for the dean to utilize to create the kind of job opportunities their students are looking for?
Yeah, David, I think that's obviously the question of the day. What are the jobs going to be, and how are we going to provide access or enhance access to those jobs, especially for Black and Brown and disadvantaged communities, or from a reskilling standpoint for those that have been either displaced pre-COVID, that incumbent workforce, and in a post-COVID landscape. I think, as Tim talked about, those jobs in robotics have broad crossover applicability between sectors and applications. Bioscience and life sciences, the technologies that and the innovation in studying those potential applications also could create countless new businesses and innovations. But as I mentioned earlier before, there's also kind of a climate stewardship policy angle here that we can explore up and down the whole coastline of the West Coast, not just California, and in terms of the carbon capture that's mentioned in the LA EDC report, and what that means to the state's long-term climate mitigation goals, the policy jobs, and the research in terms of the potential to replenish algae cultivation in the offshore as a mechanism to not only cultivate protein and fish from the sea, but to capture carbon and mitigate the effects of rising CO2 and rising coastlines. So being able to deploy research into these sectors, there's a question in the Q&A about how do we apply like a Silicon Valley aspect to this. And it kind of, for me, that would pivot from not just concentrating an R&D perspective and innovations, but also the business development and layering of incentives that help cultivate business formation is a really key component here, that kind of get to the Silicon Valley model from the early stage investment and the public policy elements that went into that. So wrapping all of that together, I know that's kind of a mixed bag, but that's kind of that's how I think about this from a jobs and place-based investment scenario building perspective.
You got it, Matt. I want to go to the questions now. We've got a number of them, and we're willing to take more if you have them. But Jeff Masson, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, says commercial fishermen are poised to help scale up the blue economy. We have boats, equipment, knowledge, and experience in providing food to the community. Do you envision a synergy between the scientific community and commercial fishing to help with food security, jobs, and strong economic waterfronts? Clearly, there are mariculture opportunities in California's offshore waters to create food supplies. Who wants to take that on? Tim, you want to start, and I'll move it around?
Sure, I would love to. I could not agree more. I mean, I'm born and raised here in San Pedro. This is the center of the fishing industry in a very, very broad region, and we have commercial fishing industry, which is smaller today than it was in the past. That is an important part of the blue economy. I mean, we have wild caught fish are sustainably caught by responsible fishermen, if I can say that still. And I think that it would be extraordinarily important to us to turn to the ocean and look for protein sources, because protein sources in the ocean are so much better for our long-term environment than terrestrial growth of beef and pork and chicken. And I think federal water aquaculture is a part of the solution. Mariculture along the coast and state waters is part of the solution. Wild catch is part of the solution. And our commercial fisheries, I mean, they have equipment, they have expertise, they have skills, and they also have a chain of distribution. So I think it's extraordinarily important to work with existing industry on the new industries.
Well, talk a little bit how you could work with them. I mean, that's the point of the question. If they're open to it and you're open to it, how do you make the connection, or have they made the connection?
In some cases, they have made the connection. I mean, sadly, in California, you can put all of the ongoing aquaculture companies in one room, it seems. I go to these Sacramento meetings and regional meetings with aquaculturists, and so many of them are commercial fishermen who have converted some of their assets or some of their expertise. And I think it's extraordinarily important to continue to do that. I think one of the things we are looking at AltaSea, which would be exciting to Dean Ramos, is that we're looking at a certification program for aquaculture. And when we develop a certification program for aquaculture, the folks who are best able to teach people how to farm the ocean are folks who fish the ocean. And I think that what we would do is we would have our existing aquaculture companies who are looking at the certification program look to commercial fisheries and say, how do we best prepare women and men for the future of farming alongside wild catching?
It is interesting to note that California, Los Angeles County and California used to be an agricultural economy, and so did Los Angeles County. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about agriculture in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that skills and opportunities abound as we need more and more protein from other sources and can't bring it from abroad the way we used to. So I think you're right on. Joe Oistick from Montauk Technologies says, I'd love to explore how to engage SMCC and other stakeholders in internships for the accelerator we are starting at AltaSea. Can you elaborate, Tim, on what that opportunity would be and how it might relate to what Dr. Ramos is doing?
Sure. Joe and his colleagues have signed on to AltaSea, and we are partners in their accelerator, which will really focus. They have a particular expertise coming out of experiences with Caltech, with JPL, and in biosciences. And they are going to be accelerating, standing up and accelerating companies at AltaSea. And I think it would be absolutely ideal. And I would give each of you a warm handoff to one another, Dean Ramos, to Joe and the Montauk Technologies Group.
Well, Dr. Ramos, let's do that handoff for a second, because part of Montauk is includes one of my favorite people, Dean Weiberg, who used to handle commercial tech transfer at JPL. Do those kinds of opportunities and internships, are they attractive, even if those internships are not fully paid jobs yet, but have that potential? Are they attractive to your students?
Absolutely. I think that Santa Monica College attracts students from all over the LA basin. And so certainly for those students that are living in, more of the South Bay area, I think those kinds of internship opportunities will be fantastic. But, it really just depends. Are we looking, to, create those internship opportunities that go right into jobs? Or are we looking for students that are going to possibly transfer, to another university? And so I think the more engagement that the faculty can have with that company and understanding the talent that they need, and encouraging students to either develop, their education appropriately and keeping them engaged. But any internship opportunity as exciting as the one that you're describing would be enticing to students. I think that if you're talking about attracting a diverse clientele, I mean, those kinds of opportunities that you're talking about sounds like the kind of opportunities that are coming out of universities and probably not as a diverse student body as that we might have at the community colleges. So I think that our students come with just such a rich background of skills. They're hungry, they're entrepreneurial, they know how to do a little bit of everything, which is what accelerators want. We really want to teach students how to get those jobs that that are going to develop skills. And when you talk to people that are upstarters or accelerators or whatever else, they're not describing one talent that they want students to have. They want them to have a wide range of talent. And so I think that getting employers to look outside of the box of their traditional interns is going to be beneficial for them and the students.
Well, Matt Horton, picking up on that, the word accelerator was used. We've talked about clusters in the LEDC report. These all fit into the work and interest of the Milken Institute, but translate that to granular level to what that means and potential for job opportunities and creating employment centers in Los Angeles County for the 1 million+ people who've either lost their job or looking for a new career in the 21st century.
Again, a great question. And let's just take a look at one area then, I guess, that I've been thinking about here lately, and Tim can correct me if I'm making any false assumptions on the opportunity here, but look at renewable energy tied to wind from the blue economy perspective. What that will really depend on in terms of the viability is battery storage, along with other renewable energy production around the state. So how the state can really embrace that in LA and beyond, even more inland, is thinking about how we can create hubs around battery storage, production, cathode production around the state. These are engineering jobs at multi-levels that require any number of certifications at different levels, like I said. So these are the potential to create or replicate the silicon chip kind of mentality that benefited Silicon Valley so well on a more statewide level is really concentrated on the prospects of renewable energy and battery storage, for me at least, and the opportunities there in terms of increasing higher paid jobs and equity around the state. I think we can't ignore that.
But Matt, I want to press you a little bit because the Milken Institute's been very interested in opportunity zones or how that's morphing into new programs. And the legislature, as the dean has said, is thinking about programs that are going to get us out of this economic cratering. Is there an opportunity zone idea for the ocean economy based in San Pedro Bay that we could take advantage of if we seeded the idea in this webinar today?
Absolutely. I think we need to stop thinking about the incentive-based structure of opportunity zones and more about the community-based opportunity, pun intended, I guess, around place-based investments. So how do we leverage opportunity zones or other economic development incentive-based mechanisms like new market tax credits to centralize business development and business formation that lead to broader-based economic growth and inclusion for communities. This is largely based on a conversation we need to have with members of the community, but along with those leaders to say, what's the potential here to incubate business startups, to incentivize business formation, to create jobs that lead to longer term equity. So taking a look at the opportunity zones around the region, I think there are, for instance, if memory serves, there's about 20 or so just along the LA River alone. So as those go down to the port and to AltaSea, it's an opportunity for leaders in the region to say, hey, how do we leverage these to create more economic development and layer other incentives on so that we can create or purposefully set up the economy we hope to have in 5, 10, 15 years.
You know, Dr. Ramos, I've gotten a question here of someone who attended your college and graduated, went on to UCLA where they graduated, and said they're really excited about this certification program. Is this a certification program? I know Tim mentioned it because of your collaboration with AltaSea. Is this something that could be done in other community colleges as well as yours? And how do you do it? How do you make it happen? Are you the person to make it happen?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think I did see that question in the chat, and that the caller wanted to know what the opportunities were for LA Harbor College, which sits right there in San Pedro. And I think that you know, the more exposure that you have, you know, I mean, Santa Monica obviously has its own ocean economy, and of course, you know, so does the South Bay. But to your specific question regarding certification, there was a very recent opportunity for community colleges to work together under some funding, and it was really the first time. And I've been at Santa Monica College for 18 years, in this job for a dozen years. There was no incentive for community colleges to work together until very recently. We've got 19 community colleges in Los Angeles, 9 of which are part of the LACCD district, and 10 of which are called the ring colleges, like Santa Monica and others that are not in LACCD. Mm-hmm. And so the legislature does not want to duplicate efforts. They don't want to, you know, have everyone doing the same thing. So, but regional collaboration is not an easy thing in and of itself. So one of the best successes that I can see in the region, and actually Bill Allen mentioned it yesterday, was Amazon was developing their Amazon Web Services, part of their organization. They were really looking to create more opportunities in cloud computing for basically all the companies that they were selling their cloud services to. There's just not enough, you know, people that have the cloud computing skills. So we were creating a pipeline of talent in the information communications technology sector. They partnered with us. It was the largest collaboration on the globe that they had, you know, as far as Amazon Web Services was concerned. We had one of our faculty members attend that really didn't have that exposure to cloud computing 5 years ago. He saw the opportunities, learned the curriculum. We co-developed a curriculum with Amazon Web Services, with the intention that we were going to share it with all 19 community colleges in Los Angeles. And that's exactly what we've done. And now those community colleges are partnering with high schools. So we have now graduated thousands of students that have cloud computing skills tied to Amazon Web Services. And we're trying to get them into the tech industry because that seems like the lowest hanging fruit. But the best opportunities for students, for, you know, underrepresented students is to go into the non-traditional fields, not just tech, because cloud computing, you know, talent and skills are needed in healthcare, they're needed in transportation, they're needed, you know, across sectors besides tech. And so very recently, Metro is hiring 20 of our cloud computing graduates. Right. So as a non-traditional sector. So
we need to capture your enthusiasm, that's for sure. That's why we recorded this, but we have a minute to close.
Okay.
And I want to let Tim bring us home here. So Tim, you started with your journey, how you got enticed to be CEO here. What's the potential of AltaSea to meet the challenges of an ocean economy workforce that we truly need? Bring us home here.
I will bring you home, but first I want to make one more shidduch, as my people say. I want Dean Ramos and Thomas Grimm to know one another. Tom Grimm is Carlsbad Aqua Farms. He's a brilliant person in this aquaculture sector, and he is looking at a certification program. So we're going to connect you after this. Okay. So what can AltaSea be besides the world's greatest water cooler in the ocean economy? Because this is exactly what we should be doing, connecting commercial fishermen to aquaculturists to universities, large tech companies to startup companies. In the World Bank definition of the blue economy, we have the ability to responsibly use the resources of the ocean to create jobs and economic development and improve the lives of folks, and to do it in a way where we preserve the ocean for the future. So not only can we take a region like San Pedro and the harbor area and Southern California and create a better life, but we can also create a life for our children and our children's children who can come into good jobs and can raise their families in communities like Wilmington and San Pedro and the Harbor Gateway. And they can be assured that their children's children will have a planet to live on. We are literally trying to save the world.
Well, that's where we started, Tim. I want to thank, because we've come to the close of the hour, all of those who've participated and our distinguished speakers, Dr. Ramos, Matt Horton, Tim, the Jenny and the AltaSea team. And I hope you'll take this to heart, because this is a positive opportunity in the county at a time when positive opportunities are looking for. So I, David Abel, want to thank you for allowing me to participate in this panel and for what AltaSea is trying to do. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thanks to the AltaSea team.
You
Thank
got it.
you very much to all of you.
Thank you.